good welcome to the visitors, and we'll call that the gallery. We're glad you're here, and we will be allowing public comment at the end of this meeting, so please stay tuned. So the first order of business is the approval of the orders of the day. Could I have a motion to approve the orders of the day? And a second? Any discussion? Those in favor say aye. Any correction, say yes. All right. The next item is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of November the 29th, 22. And I will say that we have one member of the public who has asked to speak, Kate Wilson. Is Kate Wilson in the room? Going once, going twice, not hearing from Kate Wilson. So for board members, any comments, corrections, additions to the minutes of our last meeting?
Okay, the next meeting will be January 17th, 9 a.m., the Joint Finance and Audit.
No. We need to approve the minutes. I thought you were going to.
I move approval of the board committee leadership and position membership as appointed by Mr. Hudson and the board chair.
Just one second, we'll get to you.
Are there any comments, corrections, or additions to the minutes of our meeting on November the 20th? Hearing none, I would entertain any motion to approve the minutes. All those in favor say yes. Motion passed. The next order is the board reports, approval of the board committee appointments. And if I could just make a brief comment, but before we do that, in the governance meeting, we discussed the appointments of the committee chairman and the vice chairman of each committee. I took under consideration the interest of the board members, their personal background, their experience, their time on this board, and these are the chairs and vice chairs that are being proposed. Finance Committee, Brad Baker. Vice Chair would be Bridget Fiorucci. Mission and Planning, Mr. Carter, with Vice Chair, Mr. Rowe. Quality Committee, Chair Brett Ryan, Vice Chair Patricia Mariam, excuse me. I will be Chairman of the Governance Committee, Vice Chair Brad Baker. Human Resources, Sharon Wetzler de Peters as Chair, Vice Chair Bridget Fiorucci. Audit Committee, Sarah Lodge as Chair, and Victor Rowe as the Vice Chair. Investment Committee, Victor Rowe as Chair, Sarah Lodge as the Vice Chair. And for board appointments to the Physician Services Incorporated Board, myself, Brad Baker, Bridget, Sarah, and Patricia. The Claims Adjustment Review Panel, board member Sarah Lodge, Institutional Review Board, board designee is Dr. Barry Levine, and Community Health Corporation, myself as a member. And those are the appointments. So now, Bridget.
Okay, I move approval of the board committee leadership and position membership as appointed by Mr. Hudson as the board chair.
Is there a second? Second, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes. Opposed, motion passed. Thank you. Our next order of business, under number 5, is medical staff reports, and would turn the floor over to Dr. Fiorucci.
I have nothing to report at this meeting.
Thank you. Dr. Hoffberger, Chief of Staff of the Sarasota main campus.
I would ask for a motion approving Sarasota Memorial Hospital, Sarasota bylaws revision to the advanced practicing professional privilege and forms for trauma as recommended by Sarasota Memorial Hospital, Sarasota Medical Executive Committee.
And we have heard the recommendations from the Medical Executive Committee for main campus. Is there a motion to accept their recommended changes to their bylaws?
So moved.
There's a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, ready for a vote. All those in favor say yes. Opposed? Motion passed. I'd like to call on Dr. Jefferson, Chief of Staff of SMH in Venice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask for a motion approving Sarasota Memorial Hospital Venice delineation of privileges for cardiology, the on-call EMTALA policy, adding general surgery to the list for mandatory call, and the admission and discharge criteria for the obstetrical ECC and labor, delivery, recovery, and postpartum units as recommended by the SMH Venice Medical Executive Committee.
We've heard the recommendation from the MAC in Venice. Is there a motion to accept their recommendation? And a second? Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Jefferson. For the members in the public and those who may be watching on YouTube, you may think that we moved that pretty quickly, but in our committee meetings, which are open to the public, these items are discussed in detail. At this board meeting is the formal approval of them. So I just make that comment. I'm sorry. Are there any oppositions to those? Hearing none. Okay. Got it. All right. Number 6, Bridget, the Secretary.
Thank you. Next meeting will be January 17th, 9 a.m. Joint Finance and Audit Committee, 10:30 to noon Quality Committee, noon to 12:30 closed session for hospital board meeting, 12:30 to 2 financial review, board issues, lunch, and 2 to 4 board meeting.
Super. Thank you. Number 7, the Treasurer Report, Mr. Carter.
Thank you. Okay. Item summary approval of bad debt and charity care. And proposed motions on approval of bad debts and charity care for the month of November 30th, 2022. In the amount of $19,904,000.
Any discussion? Hearing none, you're ready for a vote. All those in favor say yes. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passed. And again, I would just comment, in the earlier meetings, we had extensive discussion about the financial affairs of the hospital. And I would just remind those in the public who are so interested, you're welcome to attend those meetings. So the next item on our agenda is the financial highlights. Our CFO, Jeff Limbacher. Floor is yours.
Thank you. We're pulling up the slides right now. This will be the second month of the fiscal year, so we'll have 2 months. So we will review some of the slides will have monthly information and year-to-date information. Okay. This slide represents total revenues in our rating agency format for the system. For the month of November, we had $135,946,000 of revenues versus a budget of $117,695,000,000. For the year to date, for total revenues, again, actual is $268,217,000 versus a budget of $236,193,000 in the second bar there. Next slide is total expenses. In the first bar for the month, we had $126,498,000 of total expenses versus a budget of $115,189,000. For fiscal year to date, we had $251,766,000 revenues and $230,619,000,000 of budgeted expenses, fiscal year to date. The next slide is resulting operating income. So we had operating income for the system in the month of November of $9,448,000 versus a budget of $2,506,000. For the month, that's an operating margin percent of 6.9 versus 2.1% for the budget. For the fiscal year to date, on the bar chart to the right, we had $16,451,000 of operating income for the 2 months of the fiscal year thus far, and the budget was $5,574,000. That results in an operating margin percent year to date of 6.1% actual versus a budget of 2.4%. The next slide is statistics for the hospitals. Through the first 2 months of the fiscal year, we had an average daily occupancy of 859 versus a budget of 688. On the charts below, you see length of stay at the bottom left underneath that bar graph. We had an actual length of stay of 4.76 for the Sarasota campus, and for the Venice campus, we had an actual length of stay of 3.93. Total admissions and observation cases through the first 2 months of the fiscal year, the actual was 11,905 versus a budget of 9,735. Continuing on with statistics for the hospitals, we had surgery cases of 5,066 for the month of November versus a budget of, this is for the year to date, 5,066 for the 2 months, and the budget was 4,464 surgery cases. Our bursts for 2 months, 776 versus a budget of 702. Continuing on with statistics, our outpatient registrations for the fiscal year thus far, 93,469 versus a budget of 90,657. And then our emergency care registrations, a total of 28,355 actual versus a budget of 23,101 registrations. And the last slide for the financial summary here is case mix index for the hospitals. If you look at the bar graph all the way to the right, it shows our fiscal year case mix index. So for the Sarasota campus, the first bar is 1.93 for all patient case mix index. The Medicare specific case mix index for Sarasota campus is 2.02. The case mix index for Venice, all patients, 1.58 fiscal year to date. And the case mix index for Venice for Medicare, 1.71. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Questions for Jeff? Terrific. We'll go on to item number 9, committee reports. We had a governance committee meeting this morning. I chaired the governance committee. We actually had a very good discussion on a variety of different topics. We met for almost 2 hours, but there was 2 orders of business that we are recommending for the board's approval, and I would ask for a motion. As chairman, I can't really present a motion, but I would ask that someone make a motion approving the reasonable travel expenses for the board members attending the Governance Institute Leadership Conference February 27th through March 2nd, 2023, pursuant to the board's policy regarding regional travel expenses. Is there a second? Thank you, Patty. Hearing the discussion, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passed. I would also entertain a motion for approval of the amended code of conduct as recommended by the Governance Effectiveness Committee. Thank you. Is there a second? And Bridget seconds. Hearing any discussion? None. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, motion passed. Oh, it was correction. But yours is, against. Let the minutes reflect that Victor voted against that. There being no further business in the governance, we adjourn. Next item, I'll turn it over to David Verinder for the president and CEO.
Here, but there should be additional planning.
Okay. Yeah. Oops.
There's no action taken. I just think for the benefit of how.
Commission and Planning Board met today, earlier, and there was one update on the agenda for the board. The update is on the creation of the Diagnostic Center at Walmere and Blossom. Boy, Lang, President of Sarasota, began the presentation by reviewing the current SMH occupancy and lease agreement for Walmere Medical Glass. Next, Debbie Bohannon, Executive Director of Radiology Services, outlined the programming, financials, and timeline for the center. The Diagnostic Center will include an outpatient laboratory, general radiology, screening, mammography, bone density, and pre-admission testing. Combining these services will enhance patient experience, expand community access, and increase efficiencies. The center is expected to open for patient care in summer of 2023. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff, you doing? So I'm going to start like I do each month with the organizational report card. And just to orient you on here, we have the 5 different bullets looking at areas of concentration, our goal, and the support and rate. So I'll start with the service area of concentration, which are system patient experience. We have a goal of having at least 8 out of our 10 serviced areas meeting or exceeding or equaling 75th percentile in likelihood of recommending. I'm happy to report for the first time in a long time, we're at 10 out of 10. So a great result this year to date so far. In the people area, we have our goal of having our new hire retention, which is our percent of regular and full-time employees hired in FY 2022 that are still employed as of September 30th, 2022. We have a goal of having that be at 83% or higher. I'm happy to report that we were at 97.91% for the first 2 months, which everyone should understand this only 2 months, that's why it's so high. So it's a false concept there. I'm going to pause for the baby, so I'm not talking. Okay, so this, we play that lullaby anytime a baby is born in the organization. And Britt Reiner made the comment earlier that we needed, that is a well-deserved lullaby to hear. So, and she's exactly right. But I will tell you, if you ever hear them play twice back to back, I think the twins to or sometimes you get triplets, so it's 3 times back to back. So, anyway. Congratulations to new mom and dad. Okay, the quality section. We have our infection prevent, our area concentration and quality is our combined overall standardized infection rate being less than 0.8. I'm happy to report that we are achieving that. We're at 0.72. Just to remind everyone that the national average is 1.0 or the expected is 1.0, so we already set our number considerably less than. In the finance area, we have our, which Jeff has already gone through, our CFO has already gone through the finances. We have our goal of having our operating margin at 5%, which is our budget. We are tracking higher than that at this point at 5.6%. And then finally, in the growth section, we have two items that we look at, our inpatient admissions, including observation patients. We have a goal of having that at 61,950 for the year. We're tracking higher than that because we've had an incredible volume the first 2 months at 75,757. And then finally, in the outpatient registrations, we have a goal being 1.3 million for the year. We're tracking higher than that as well, 1.377. Moving along, looking at the detail to the patient experience report card. Good news is usually I have to point out a couple areas, maybe 1 or 2 areas that didn't quite make the 75th. It's all green. So all 10 out of 10 this month. Once again, we are comparing ourselves in the middle column to the national score and then to the far right, the 75th percentile. So congratulations to our leaders in those areas. Next up is our nursing, SMH Nursing and Rehab Center. It's been rated among the best in the nation. So Sarasota Memorial Nursing and Rehab Center was named among the nation's top nursing homes for short and long-term rehabilitation in U.S. News' annual Best Nursing Homes ratings. Now in its 13th year, the 2022-2023 Best Nursing Homes ratings recognize top nursing homes in every U.S. state to help prospective residents and their families make informed decisions about where to receive nursing home care. Only 16% of the more than 15,000 skilled nursing facilities evaluated earned the best nursing home rating this year. SMH has been providing short and long-term rehab and nursing care, skilled nursing care at its Clark Road campus for more than 25 years. It cares for about 120 residents at a given time. SMH joins National Study Prevention of Ovarian Cancer. The Sarasota Memorial Research Institute is among 318 research sites across the nation participating in clinical trial aimed at preventing ovarian cancer in women at high risk for the disease, which is the 5th leading cause of cancer-related death among women. Known as the SORIC trial, the study will take place over the next 10 years and will assess whether removing fallopian tubes reduces the risk of ovarian cancer among premenopausal women with inherited BRCA1 mutations as effectively as removing both the ovaries and fallopian tubes. And you see a picture of Dr. Beverly Long, who is working on that study for us. In the Da Vinci robotic surgery milestones, SMH recently unveiled the latest generation Da Vinci robot, the Da Vinci SP, which is single port. Versatile and high performance single port surgical system that allows surgeons to perform complex surgery through a single incision or a natural opening without any incisions at all. Brian D. Jellison, Cancer Institute team members Peter Vossler, a head and neck cancer surgeon, and urologic surgeon Dr. Dan Kaplan and Matthew Perry will use the system for robotic kidney, bladder, and prostate surgery. Clinical trials are underway to expand the use of the single port robot and for rectal surgery applications. Cancer Institute member Sam Aguilar leads the team that will use the robot for transanal resection and procedures. In other Da Vinci news, congratulations to SMH cardiovascular thoracic surgeon Dr. Paul Vesco, pictured with the team at Wright for completing his 1,000th Da Vinci surgery. SMH Community Clinic salutes volunteer doctors and 30 years of care to low-income and uninsured patients. Earlier this month, Sarasota Memorial celebrated the 30th anniversary of its community specialty clinic and saluted scores of active and retired doctors providing free medical care, consults, and specialty services to thousands of low-income, uninsured, and underinsured residents of Sarasota County each year. More than 150 active and retired physicians representing dozens of specialties, including cardiac, cancer, orthopedic, gynecology, urology, and surgical care, treat nearly 5,000 patients a year at the community clinic and hospital, and often carve out time to see them in their private practices. But his staff will win a national award. It got featured on the famous marquee. Congratulations to our hospitality liaison, SP, who won the Centos Corporation's CATE Award, Cleaning to Advance the Patient Experience. The national honor given to the standout environmental service techs who go above and beyond and maintain clean and safe environments. SP was one of 10 winners out of more than 700 nominations. SB pictured above, third from the left, received a $2,500 check from Centos, who donated another $2,500 to the Sarasota Memorial Healthcare Foundation in her honor. SB was featured on the famous NASDAQ marquee in Times Square, along with other winners. Kind of neat. Construction update, the Cornell Family Behavioral Health Pavilion. Our mock rooms have been created for patient, physician, and staff input. The framing will be complete at the end of the month, and a new roof will be on by March. And we are still projecting an opening fall of 2023. Construction update on research and education. The demolition of the 1950s era Doctor's Garden is officially complete. And well, we have some tolerant up there, but the vacant site will be used for valet parking through spring of 2023. The new institute is currently in design and development, and permitting and construction is expected to begin in summer of 2023. Also, a construction update on SMH Venice expansion. Construction is underway in the new tower at SMH Venice, which will add 102 private patient suites and bring the hospital's capacity to 212 beds. Work is also underway to expand the emergency care center and surgical capacity. Projects scheduled to open in 2024. And the final construction update is on our outpatient cancer pavilion. The design development nearing completion, interior and exterior materials and aesthetics are being determined. Cave surgery has been vacated completely and the demolition to occur in early 2023, and construction on the tower itself will begin in summer 2023. That is my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for David? Hearing none, we will move on with the agenda item. The consent agenda, I don't believe we have anything on the consent agenda for today. And the next item is public comments. I have 10 sign-up sheets, yellow sheets, for those who want to address on a variety of different topics, and these go in no certain order. I'll have the speaker first, followed by 2 other people so that you'll have a heads up when your name will come up. I ask that you keep your remarks down to 5 minutes. I also ask that if it's duplicating something that someone else has said, that you make your remarks briefer, just to reinforce your support of whatever else may have been said. So we'll begin with Tanya Paris, followed by Lisa Roulette, followed by Dr. Sherry Weinstein. And I'll ask Caroline Kalish to keep the 5 minutes. And she'll give you at 4 minutes, she'll give you a heads up. You have 1 minute to wrap up. So welcome, Tanya. Can you hear us? Are you okay?
I'm for the other side too.
And if we could actually, I know you're a good speaker, Tanya. I've heard you several times, but please speak directly on the microphone. So
Absolutely.
you got it. Okay, yeah.
So good afternoon. My name is Tanya Caruso, Sarasota County citizen and Sarasota County Moms for America president. At last month's meeting, we encouraged the public to attend and bring their testimonies before this board to address grievances and to show you all that there are plenty of cases out here of dissatisfied and extremely hurt family members. Family that will never get back their husbands, mothers, and fathers. A public that clearly needs answers and is begging for closure. Being that this is a hospital publicly funded, I thought for sure it was an invaluable opportunity for you to see what your customers felt and thought about in regard to the care administered here. But what was so disheartening is that your customers, the public, was yet again met with a defense system using doctors who are asked to speak at the same time as the public is crying their hearts out to you. So to whomever organized that performance, it was the wrong thing to do at a very wrong time. We, the public, are not your enemies. We want to solve this problem for humanity and specifically at our county level. We really believe doctors have been trained over the years to give up their freedom of thought and defend a narrative that they have fallen victim to. At some point, we must all face our facts. Our emotions and fear will settle, and we are all left with hindsight and casualties. One of those facts is something that was used across the entire medical practice in the public starting in January 2020. It's called gaslighting. It's an insidious form of manipulation intended to gain psychological control, where individuals are fed false information to fuel their perception of reality and render them incapable of making informed judgments. The very fact of communicating in such fashion implicates a dominator hierarchical power dynamic in which information flows at top-down manner rather than originating as true dialogue among equals. I hope you all remember that in science, debate and alternative approaches are normal and should be expected, especially when there's a novel virus. You can clearly look back at those doctors last month and see what they said, and see that physician autonomy was lacking when they touted that they used peer-reviewed studies and standard of care. I'm sure that you all must be aware that doctors across the nation were not able to get counter-narrative studies published, so alternative approach was not made available. You all were being fed with one-sided studies. I hope you also know that peers were painted as villains, conspiracy theorists, or mad scientists. Anyone going against the narrative was subjected to harassment. They were subjected to coercion, silencing, social bullying of doctors who published research that runs counter to the corporatist narrative, and accused of personal or scientific misconduct, threatened with litigation, loss of licensure and board certification. That right there is madness. And it does not serve our medical community or patients who need the help. We want our doctors back. We want them to take responsibility and take control and do what they do, which is treat the disease with medications that are working. We want our doctors to help spread the word of early treatment with the use of vitamins, antibiotics, healthy eating, avoiding sugar, using off-label drugs when your patients request it, listening to your patients. Start researching other doctors' treatments that have been shown to work, and above all, stop being so scared. Restore your confidence and have courage to do what's right. So I ask, as a hospital system or a donor, what side of history do you want to be on? Obviously, we the public are onto something, as I'm sure you're all aware that Governor DeSantis will be introducing a new bill, which will be designed to protect physicians' independent judgment, to protect the doctor's First Amendment rights, and to protect the physician's independent right to dissent from orthodox narratives. This will give our physicians the breathing room to do what they do best, and I hope this hospital shines on a light for the change that is needed. We appreciate last month Board Member Vic Rowe motioning for an investigation, and a special committee to be set up to review protocols along with patient care. I think his motion clearly laid out exactly what the public wanted, which included members outside of this hospital to be part of that committee. What his motion put forward was allowing for an ability to have an outside view in, rather than the fox guarding the henhouse, and using the already existing quality committee that currently consists of hospital internals is not the answer we're looking for. I'm asking the board to reconsider his motion, make the adjustments that are needed, which include at a minimum of 2 outside unbiased opinions, which should be a medical doctor or outside of this hospital. And I want you guys to all think about this as a hospital system, administrator, lawyer, or doctor. What side of history do you really truly want to be on? Please just think about that over Christmas.
Thank you, Tanya. Lisa Roulette, followed by Dr. Jerry Langston, followed by Cynthia Schrock.
As you, our community's chosen hospital board members, execute your role in prioritizing patient safety, you will discover, if you haven't already, that you cannot trust the FDA, the CDC, or the federal government to prioritize patient safety. One of the many examples is Maddie DeGarry. She's the 12-year-old Pfizer vaccine trial participant who was screaming in pain less than 24 hours after her injection. She lost the ability to walk and is now in a wheelchair, lost the ability to eat and now needs a feeding tube. And the trial report vastly misrepresented the severe nature of her adverse event. Maddie's mom said that the FDA has turned a blind eye to Maddie, showing no interest in investigating if the trial report was fraudulent. You will discover, if you haven't already, that the FDA also shockingly turned a blind eye to an auditor of 2 of the trial sites for the Pfizer COVID vaccine. Brooke Jackson, one of the auditors, contacted the FDA as a whistleblower and is ready to testify under penalty of perjury that when she audited 2 trial sites, she found problems so egregious that it should have invalidated data from those sites, including carrying out the trial partially unblinded, even though they reported it as blinded, and problems like falsification of data and destruction of evidence. She says that after she privately reported the violation she witnessed to the FDA as a whistleblower, reporting off-site to keep it confidential, not only did the FDA never come out to investigate, somehow her trial site was alerted of her whistleblower report and she was fired that same day. As you learn about this hospital's COVID response, including the This Is Our Shot campaign that is featured this day on the SMH's website with the advice, get the shot, stating that it is safe and recommended for pregnant women, you may hear assurances that we are just following federal recommendations. When you conduct independent research on the vast number of unexpected post-vaccination deaths and horrific injuries, you will know that any answer that says we are just blindly following the federal guidance is not at all reassuring, nor satisfactory when it comes to patient safety. Because you will find that the federal agencies have been ignoring the data that actually reflects unprecedented post-vaccination deaths and disabling injuries. You will likely conclude that the federal agencies are not seriously vetting these vaccines and actually authorize the latest one based on the experience of just 8 mice and 0 humans. 0 humans studied results when they authorized it. When you confirm for yourself that everything I've mentioned is highly likely to be accurate, especially since one of those reporting is prepared to testify under oath and the other has appeared before the U.S. Senate, once you have seen with your own eyes the federal agency's disturbing lack of action or interest when faced with highly credible reports of monumental fraudulent data in the trials, you will likely be appalled, absolutely appalled, at the apparent reckless disregard these agencies seem to have for accurately reporting facts that impact patient safety. It is likely that most of you will come to the point where you conclude that the federal agencies have shattered your trust, and that we cannot in good faith base hospital protocols on their broken assurances that the bar for patient safety has been reached, because it has not. In fulfilling your role of overseeing patient safety, you will make sure that the buck stops here at this hospital. At the very least, you will pull down the website page that says that the COVID vaccine is safe for pregnant women, when the facts do not exist to back that up.
1 minute.
I believe you all have the chance to go down in history as heroes for turning the tide and promoting patient safety and quality of care when it comes to recommended COVID protocols. You, our chosen Sarasota Memorial Hospital board members, were not elected to be just another passive rubber stamp of approval. You were elected to be the independent set of eyes and an independent voice protecting our community. May you all succeed in that endeavor.
Thank you, Ms. Dr. Sherry Weinstein, followed by Cynthia Schronk, followed by Cynthia McCoy, I believe.
It's Sherry Weinstein.
Hello, Sherry Weinstein.
And thank you for allowing me to address the board again. I was here last time and I didn't get a chance to let everybody know that I'm not the only doctor on staff that feels the way I do. I had a lot of doctors that were actually texting me, and congratulating me and thanking me after my presentation and saying they were too scared to come out and speak. They were scared of losing their OR privileges, their cath lab privileges, having certain repercussions. They didn't want to compromise everything that they had. Now, I have never been one to be an activist, but I'm actively concerned about what's happening in the community. So I want everybody to know that I do appreciate the doctors that stood up in the last meeting and said that they felt that they did the best that they could do. However, we were short-staffed. One of the reasons we were short-staffed is because the staff was being forced to get vaccinated. And I'm aware of several nurses that left the hospital because of vaccine mandates. My husband was one. Okay, so yes, we're short-staffed, but part of that we created our own issues. Okay, I wanted to ask. It would have been nice to ask, but we had a house full of staff and doctors here. How many of the doctors in this hospital have ever submitted a VAERS report to the vaccine adverse event reporting site? I can ask anybody in the community if anybody here submitted a VAERS report. It's doctors. Well, there is another VAERS site as well. I will tell you that my ER friends, my hospitalist friends, that this hospital told me it is frowned upon to submit a VAERS report. Yes, it takes time to do. It takes probably 30 minutes for each report, but it's something that needs to happen. And CDC had asked that any event that occurred within, certainly within 2 to 4 weeks of having a vaccine should be classified as an adverse reaction. Yet doctors aren't reporting it. I am reporting it. Okay, I've witnessed huge increases in all kinds of cancers, rare cancers, multiple cancers in one person, dementia, supranuclear palsy in 6 of my patients. I mean, this is a rare form of Parkinsonism. I've never seen one case in 30 years. I've got 6 cases, actually down to 5 now, there's one die. Okay, lots of cancers, lots of cardiovascular disease, lots, AFib, everything you can imagine. One of the issues is there are no ICD-10 codes for COVID-19 vaccine adverse reactions. Do you know that? There's codes for every other vaccine adverse reaction, multiple codes for hepatitis, for influenza, for shingles vaccine reaction, but none for COVID-19. Also, there is no ICD-10 code for someone to be fully vaccinated against COVID, only partially vaccinated or unvaccinated. So guess what? If you've gotten the vaccine and it's within 2 weeks of your receipt of the vaccine, you're considered unvaccinated. That skews the data tremendously. Recent panels in European Parliament and the US Senate describe the vaccines are more dangerous than COVID itself in most age groups. Other countries have banned the vaccines, and the EU Parliament has sued the vaccine manufacturers to get their money back. I'm concerned that these gene injection vaccines are being grandfathered in as templates for more RNA vaccine technology and cancer, and they are not yet proven safe and effective. One of the senior advisors to the FDA, Dr. David Wardler, he said that these vaccines actually meet the definition for gene therapy, not for vaccines.
1 minute.
CDC changed the name of vaccine definition of vaccine. Therefore, we need to be doing the following for 15 years before we say they're safe and effective. Continuing to push these vaccines encourages more immunity and faster mutations. It keeps the pandemic going. 79% of hospitalized patients with Omicron are fully vaccinated. There have been no randomized clinical trials showing that vaccine decreased hospitalizations or COVID deaths, and there are no randomized clinical trials showing that the masks decrease transmission of COVID. It is clear that many smart, well-trained doctors are not aware of the science or trying to follow government dictates that are not aligned with the science. I humbly ask the board to encourage roundtable meetings where clinical leadership can discuss these issues with many medical staff rather than without an opportunity for a clinical discussion. I would be happy to help sponsor some of the more successful doctors in the country that are treating COVID to come and give us time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. Next is Cynthia Strong, to be followed by Cynthia McCoy, to be followed by Dr. Stephen Gafanti.
I was here last month and I'm back again because I didn't get to finish what I needed to say last month. From Sarasota Memorial Hospital's website, Code of Conduct, we affirm the following commitments. To our patients, we are committed to providing quality care that exceeds the expectations of our customers. Care that is safe, sensitive, compassionate, promptly delivered, and cost-effective. We recognize the patient's rights to impartial access to medical care, individual respect and dignity, privacy and confidentiality, personal safety, and explanation of fees and communication concerning his or her care. We also provide mechanisms for initiation, review, and resolution of complaints, which is what we are here for today. All individuals seeking healthcare services from us will be informed of patients' rights and responsibilities. Does a cardiologist that speaks to a patient over the phone because he's afraid of a virus sound like someone that is exceeding the patient expectations of his patient or the patient's family? Does a cardiologist that speaks to a patient over the phone sound like he is giving impartial access to medical care? The fact that the cardiologist knew my husband was having a heart attack and chose to do nothing does not meet your code of care that is safe, sensitive, nor promptly delivered. The very fact that the code of conduct of this hospital was broken deserves an investigation. My daughter gave birth to our first grandchild while my husband was just a few floors above her. She was allowed one support person and a doula. Even if she had tested positive for COVID, she would have still been allowed a support person and a doula. So I asked, if someone is giving birth is allowed a support person, then can I be a support person to my husband in the ICU? This just makes sense. I was denied 22 days, and not once was I allowed in to see my husband. 22 days. The last time I ever touched him alive was the day I dropped him off at the ER. Last month, there was a lady here that shared that her husband was the first COVID patient at SMH. She made the statement that the hospital staff called her 3 to 4 times every day. She never had to call for updates. They always called her. I never received that courtesy. I had to call 2 to 4 times every day for updates and asked to speak to a doctor only to be rejected by the nurses saying the doctors don't speak to the family. I have a direct text from my husband that said, the doctor said he doesn't call. How does that fit in with your code of conduct and quality care that exceeds the expectations of our customers? I have a hard time understanding how the code of conduct was being followed when on the morning my husband's mother passed away, he called me at 5:30 a.m. Honey, Mom just passed. We cried together and asked him why he was calling me. He said they came in, woke me up and told me first and asked me if I would call my siblings. I'm having a hard time breathing. Can you call everyone? What kind of code of conduct is that? What kind of hospital who has the number of all the other siblings, including his sister, who was the power of attorney for medical things, goes into a man, wakes up a man in ICU at 5:30 in the morning on a high flow machine that we now know was having a heart attack, and tells him his mom died, and then asks him to call everyone else? Who does that?
1 minute.
It's like the medical industry lost all common sense or compassion for those they were caring for. And compassion is one of the words in your code of conduct. Then on the morning of September 14th, 2021, what kind of hospital calls a wife with no warning and says, Cynthia, this is Dr. H. We lost Eric. That's it. A cold, heartless phone call with no warning, no compassion, just hangs up the phone.
instruction to be able to come to the hospital. So the only time I ever spoke to a doctor to get some answers was the day after he was intubated and the day he passed away. What happened to your code of conduct? I'm coming to you and asking you to do the right thing. There must be accountability for hospitals that gain so much from those of us who lost everything. Be courageous, be willing to be accountable, and do the right thing.
Thank you, Cynthia. Next is Cynthia McCoy, followed by Dr. Gafanti, followed by Lesko Brink.
Thank you. I'm here in support of Cynthia Schrock because of the death of her husband. Esteemed members of the board of directors, I thank you for your service to our community by holding high standards for this fine hospital. And I understand that it is to run this hospital as a profitable business that's part of your duty. But it's with a heavy heart that I bring you news from a surprisingly large number of community citizens who no longer trust this hospital to put the health and welfare of their relatives and friends above their profits. I know this because I've circulated a petition to Governor DeSantis to clarify his COVID relief bill so that patients aren't denied rightful access to compensation or suing, basically, for obvious medical malpractice. It's the collective opinion of 88 people whose signatures I got within an hour and a half, that this hospital, perhaps protecting just a handful of doctors, is hiding behind the COVID relief bill our governor passed with, I believe, no intention of robbing Floridians their right to sue for compensation based on provable medical malpractice, just because that death occurred concurrent with the presence of COVID-19. My great hope is that this board will be eager to do the right thing on behalf of any patient, like Eric Schrock, who entered the hospital in the middle of a heart attack that Cynthia didn't know about until she was finally given 4,500 pages of medical records. He had 2 sets of blood work that showed that he was in the middle of a heart attack, and yet despite the hospital's pulmonologist and nurse practitioner advising that the heart be dealt with first, he would be alive today if he had been given a stent, according to another cardiologist. Eric his doctor chose just to give him remdesivir and intubation, and therefore he died unnecessarily. I just hope that you will rise above the interests of the hospital financially and do the right thing for those victims of this horrible protocol that was followed that allowed people to die because they were forced to either have a medication that wasn't their central need. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Gafanti is next, to be followed by Lesko Brandon, to be followed by Nicole Landis, or Landers, I'm not sure, but Dr. Gafanti.
Okay, last month I requested you investigate the patient cases with the patient or the next of kin. After some deliberation, you graciously supported my request. Thank you. I come before you this afternoon to discuss the difference between the review written by Cheryl Roberts, Executive Director of Quality Risk Management, and the transparency needed for closure by those who lost their loved ones in the purpose of the investigation. Let me quote from my last talk. Quote, I can assure you elder abuse by nurses in security is not taught in nursing schools. And doctors don't randomly pick treatments they can't explain. Unquote. So your investigation should reveal the procedures that allow these patients to be so poorly treated. To be clear, I'm interested in revealing the puppet master and cutting the strings that make doctors write orders they don't understand and nurses abandon the patient. I'm fairly confident the puppet master is protected by law So maybe our $800,000 lawyer can tell us. It may be a network of laws that involve insurance companies and federal agencies, so maybe our CEO knows. But whoever or whatever the puppet master is, believe me, cutting the strings is important to every living person in this county. Let's look at just one fingerprint of this puppet master. I requested an electronic copy of my complete medical records. In response, I'm given on paper a 33-page document for an 11-day stay. I then point out that I needed it electronically and received a 222-page version of my complete medical records, a version that was printed out and then scanned so that it could be harder to find anything in it. The police, on the other hand, received a third version in which I was, quote, laying in bed aggressively, end quote. 3 different versions of a chart that would take maybe 5 minutes to export to a flash drive. In my letter to Dr. Fiorica, I wrote, I am unsure whether the records were altered after my request or the medical records people were told to withhold certain information. I do know that if you review the entire record, there will be major discrepancies because it's hard for your staff to make up a coherent story, end quote. In Robert's reply, she both denied there were multiple versions and explained why there were multiple versions in the same paragraph. It seems to me like a cover. In order to avoid this inconsistency in this new review, I requested that both the reviewing doctors and the patient's next of kin get the same complete electronic record exported to a flash drive at least 2 weeks before the review. Moreover, to create closure, the patient's loved one should have a medical doctor of his or her choosing with her when you discuss this, quote, in-depth review, end quote. This doctor must be able to ask questions. I believe this will allow for a more complete understanding on both sides. In summary, I believe the doctors were compelled to treat me and others in a manner not their choosing. I want to know who did the compelling, how they maintained that power to compel, and what could be done to stop this before more people die. Unless someone in this room wants to admit they know the puppet master, our first step is to review the charts so that your medical review doctors can become aware of the depth of the problem. I've heard people blame a protocol, and if you have a protocol that tells the medical records people to print a document and then scan it rather than export it to a flash drive, I'd like to see that document. If you have a protocol that tells the nurse to time up a patient who wants to leave AMA, I would like that document. And who issued it? If you have a protocol that tells the doctor to not treat a bacterial pneumonia, I would like that document and who issued it. The fearmongers want you to think that this is an us versus them situation. But really, with 75% of the population going to this hospital, it's just us. When it is your turn to be a patient, don't you want to be sure the puppet master's strings are cut?
Thank you, Dr. Bonte. Next is Lesko Brandon, to be followed by Nicole Landers, I believe, and followed by Josephine Mackin, I believe. I'm not sure about that last name, but Josephine Bird. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Lesko Brandon. Thank you for letting me speak at Sarasota Correctional Institution. Oh, is this a hospital? I thought it was a prison, which didn't allow family members to be with their close relatives in the hospital. I know about prisons. For years, I worked as a volunteer going into prisons teaching meditation. Often I would be at a maximum security prison. I would be in a room all by myself with men who had committed murder. You know what? I felt safe. I felt protected. I honestly felt they would protect me if there was a threat. I felt this because they were grateful that I'd come to help uplift them. Recently, I was told I needed surgery here at Sarasota Memorial Hospital. I canceled it. I'm like, listen, I don't feel safe here. I don't trust this place. I've seen you murder people here with your protocols. You don't follow medicine or science, you follow the money. Sarasota Memorial Hospital received $132 million from the federal government for COVID-1984 related protocols. You lied and told people they had COVID when they didn't. You used the PCR test to justify this lie. The creator of this test, Kerry Mullis, said this test couldn't be used as a diagnostic tool. You withheld long approved medicines by the FDA, hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin from patients when they begged for it. You wouldn't let family members see their loved ones at the time of need. Was that so they couldn't see you killing their family members? You gave them remdesivir, a drug so toxic the clinical trial was terminated before the trial was finished because over half the patients had died from multiple organ failure. And you're still using remdesivir. But somebody said it's called run, death is near. And to finish these patients off, we put them on a ventilator to shut them up, knowing full well about 90% of people put on ventilators die within a relatively short period of time. Another issue you have not addressed is the difference between vaccinated and unvaccinated blood. There's a huge difference, and you know it. So please raise your hand if you're willing to take remdesivir or receive a transfusion of vaccinated blood. Anyone? You should set an example for all your patients. Let's see how safe these protocols really are. So again, I ask, is this Sarasota Memorial Hospital or Sarasota Correctional Institution or the Auschwitz concentration camp in Nazi Germany? As at the Nuremberg trials after World War II, the perpetrators and collaborators were put on trial. Many were tried and then executed. Are you different from these people? They just said, I'm just following orders. If you were a board member or doctor during the pandemic and committed these atrocities, you need to resign immediately and let the newly elected board members run this hospital with integrity, with genuine concern for every patient. Just because you wear a white coat and pretend to know everything won't save you from God's wrath. In case you didn't hear about it, although somebody did mention it, last week Governor DeSantis established a public health integrity committee that will be filing a petition to call it a statewide grand jury. This will lead to both civil and criminal prosecution of crimes of various medical, drug, and hospital entities. I will be sending them the names. I will be sending them the names of the board members, doctors who've been involved in harming their patients. I'm not the only one who's contracted. Each and every one of you is guilty of these horrific crimes against humanity. There will be a second trial, and I won't be the only one giving your names to that tribunal. And that does not include God, who watches everything we do and metes out justice in his own way.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All right, next, Nicole Landers, followed by Josephine Mackin, followed by Kate Wilson, if she came back into the room. Okay, we called for you earlier, but you're now number 3 on deck. So, Ms. Landers.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys so much for allowing public comment. It is an honor to be with you today, and I thank you for invoking Adonai Elohim at the beginning of your session. It's powerful. Every one of us in this room is here with the same motive, to love and support these patients. I'm the director of a national team of legal and medical experts. We perform medical rescues. One of you will know what that is, but it's where a patient from your hospital or many other across the country or their families call and ask us to please get them out because they think the hospital's trying to kill them. Thousands upon thousands of contacts we get. It's mortifying. Been a nurse for almost 30 years. I'm not here to reprimand anyone. I'm here to share that those who have come today have come to bless you, not to harm you. They've come to speak the truth, and it is different than what you know, but it is powerful, and it is diverse, and it is what our goal should be as scientists, as humans, and those who serve at 9. You are blessed. You are blessed that your community is talking to you. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, thousands across this country, who wouldn't dare to come in and meet with the board and share their concerns. I encourage you to seek your hearts. Look at your patient bill of rights. Look at your mission statement. Consider your objectives before the Joint Commission. You have a gold standard seal. Those who are talking about vaccine injuries, my foundation has an alternative vaccine injury reporting system. I read the reports every day. They are mortifying. They're mortifying. You have a beautiful opportunity to listen to your public, to search your hearts, to convene a committee that is objective and not inspired by financial incentives, that can truly investigate. You have an opportunity to groundbreak and lead. And I encourage you to do it, and I'll be praying for each one of you as you do. God bless you all.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Josephine Mackin, be followed by Kate Wilson, to Anusana Michella Matthews, or Matthew.
Good afternoon. My name is Josephine Nackett, and thank you very much for this forum. I'm a physician. My specialty is physical medicine and rehabilitation, and I applaud you for a wonderful survey for your rehab facility. That's a great job. Sincerely applauding. I'm here because I'm also a private person and also a medical person, so I hope to give my 2 cents. The response to COVID pandemic has changed our lives. In the beginning, it was understandable that there was a lot of confusion and fear. Everyone tried his or her best, and I salute all the frontline healthcare providers for their courage and sacrifice. We believe that Sarasota Memorial Hospital is staffed with very fine physicians and allied health professionals, and they have earned great trust and affection from the patients and families until recently. Something must have changed, one might wonder aloud. In the midst of pandemic response, we heard what worked and what did not work. What was striking was that we heard success from independent doctors and from developing countries combating the disease. Simple and effective medications have proven to save lives. However, unfortunately, these voices were ignored, resulting in needless suffering and death. The response of my hands are tied by healthcare professionals when requested a certain life-saving medication is not acceptable. Let's not forget that physicians are given an enormous amount of trust and privilege to treat their patients. The public trusts the doctors and, the public trusts the doctors and the public asks the doctors to give their own best medical clinical judgment and not just from protocols. So far, it is clear that following protocols alone has not been working, as we could see from the not so insignificant number of deaths and grievances and complaints. Let's remind ourselves of the basic tenet of medical ethics: do no harm. Physicians are capable of using their clinical expertise, knowledge, and judgment. Physicians in recent decades have practiced centralized medicine, which in many cases did result in great advancement and improvement of health and well-being of the public. However, rigid application to protocols has resulted in harm. Let's not forget let's not forget that the wise adage that medicine is an art still applies, especially, I might add, during the pandemic time. Let's not be afraid to uphold the Hippocratic Oath and be knowledgeable, independent, and responsible. Let's work hard to restore the trust of the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kate Wilson, to be followed by Michaela Matthew. And I don't have any other cards. These two.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Kate Wilson. I have comment on the November meeting, the minutes of that meeting, and that was read through my additional public comment today. Last month, I heard the same sentiment from physicians who spoke here at the board meeting, as I have been hearing from my patients, our community, for the last 30 or so months. Both are feeling confused, angry, emotionally exhausted, and afraid. Instead of pointing fingers at one another and dividing ourselves on yet another subject, I'm here to encourage you to take a different approach. We have before us a fundamental flaw. Integrity has been superseded by corruption. It is so pervasive and ingrained that even the majority of our best and brightest have failed to ask critical questions when things do not add up. Their hands are tied. This hospital is not alone in being caught in a trap of bureaucracy and finances over critical thinking and skill. Doctors are trained to follow the latest scientific research, and this time they were not permitted to question the real-time results of that science. This, combined with the multiple stressors from nearly every angle over a prolonged period of time, has left our medical professionals as well as our communities traumatized. So much of this last nearly 3 years does not add up. Daily, more information is brought to the surface, and more people fall ill despite the fact that 65% of the world's population has had at least one of the nearly 12 billion doses of the so-called safe and effective COVID-19 vaccination. It is time to take a closer look at what benefit this has had and what harm it has caused. People have been suddenly dropping dead all over the world since 2021, far beyond the normal of sudden death, without explanation or investigation. Embalmers are now reporting severely blocked blood vessels of the bodies they are processing. Fibrotic-like growths that have taken the shape of the vessel and include the flow of blood and, of course, embalming fluids. This is how these mysterious structures are being discovered. They are found in all-cause mortalities and are pointing to being a part of the consequences of the draconian rollout of an experimental gene therapy promoted as a vaccine. Today, the CDC, as well as the marquee up front of this hospital, continue to advise getting and keeping up with regular so-called boosters. Remember that this shot is still only authorized for emergency use. Many scientists and some of our state leaders have brought this up only to be ridiculed and ignored. We must take a step back and listen to one another, ask some critical questions, and get some transparent answers before continuing on this path. When a lie is told often enough, it becomes believable. The hospital and medical establishment is a pillar of the community and has a responsibility to first do no harm. You, the board, have a very big job to do. It is not just about a review of a few cases, a few employees, or even just about the recent policies and protocols. There is a larger picture here that we have been avoiding. What other industry trains its professionals for years, only to have them limited in their professional growth and development by business people who determine what is the best way for them to practice their art? These business people and policy writers and stockholders and ultimately bankers have never even sat with a patient. They've never looked into the eyes of someone who is afraid, in pain, and asking or even begging for their help. They have never seen, touched, or listened to anyone that they, for the sake of efficiency, have crammed into a little box with a code that must be clicked for payment to be issued. The medical staff needs to be awarded the ability to practice science in real time. When the treatment protocols coming down from the authorities who also control the payment of your fee-for-service industry are contradictory of what is being seen in practice on the ground, there is a fundamental flaw. The medical doctors must have the right and the freedom to speak up and speak out. The few MDs and PhDs, nurses, and others who have done so since early on in this horrific layered tour
crimes against humanity have been discredited, ignored, and completely ruined by the media, academia, and their peers. Doctors need to know that the people want them to practice real science, to stop doing the same thing expecting different results. We want them to ask critical questions and try new things. We want them to stand up to policy and protocols created by MBAs and financiers rather than MDs and PhDs. I urge the board, on behalf of my family, my community, and my patients, to form a special committee. This committee must include third-party objective group of medical practitioners, community members, and concerned, informed, and involved citizens. While discovering who is ultimately responsible for implementing and maintaining inhumane protocols with known fatal side effects during the last nearly 3 years, this group must also work to unravel the ties of bondage around medical practitioners.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Thank you. Michaela Matthew. Going once. Oh, here you are, Sue. No, thank you.
Good afternoon. Medicine is an applied science. It means it isn't static. It means it isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. It requires a doctor to assess each patient individually. It requires doctors to be objective, curious, and knowledgeable of the latest science. It requires doctors to use their clinical experience. There is outstanding evidence from the community that the doctors within this hospital are derelict in their duties to the patient and their oath to do no harm. Upon reflection of last month's highly emotional board meeting, I'm disgusted. Whomever organized the effort to request members of the community and doctors and medical staff of this facility to attend the board meeting and speak during public comment period is distasteful, and that is the politest thing I can say. Your attempt was clearly to run out the time and not allow the members of this community that fund this community to speak to this board about their family members' experiences and their deaths at your hands. I am appalled. Whoever sits on this board that ordered that decision needs to resign immediately. We will be exposing this. This is distasteful. And it is evident that this is a pattern because there was evidence of this board trying to silence the narrative of this community during that hospital protest that took place 2 days last year. There was not one mention of that protest in the board minutes, but what the board chose to do instead, let the record reflect, you organized your own protest to take place in support of this hospital and its practices. And then you put that in your following month's board meeting. Again, appalling and disgusting. The chairman deferred the motion to convene an independent review committee and allow the hospital's quality review team to take a first look. Didn't this quality review team already take a first look at a number of these cases, particularly the ones that have already reached out to the hospital and the ones that engaged with the board during the time of their loved ones' experience in this hospital? Didn't that already happen? What is the protocol? What is the procedure? What were their results? They had an opportunity. It's time to move past that and engage what the public has requested take place. And that you intervene and create this independent committee, as was outlined by the prior speaker, and impanel outside members and get to the bottom of this. A few things I didn't get to say at the last meeting.
there's a few pieces of science that were completely overlooked. There was a hydroxychloroquine study that had 90,000 participants that we know was fabricated and was later retracted.
One minute.
We also know that there have been 5 large ivermectin studies that state ivermectin doesn't work. All of those studies were structured in various ways to fail. Dosing too late, beyond the viral replication phase, and dosing too low. We also now know that the criminal corrupt cryptocurrency FTX funded the Together trial, which was one of those ivermectin studies, to the tune of $15 million. The public is going to find that FTX also funded a number of measures of this COVID propaganda. So I am asking you to convene the committee, to do the review and hold accountable and change your policies. I'm commanding that you stop propaganding the community. Stop recommending vaccines to pregnant women for the COVID-19.
Thank you.
And I encourage anybody who has had a member of their family harmed to file a sentinel report against this hospital.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? I don't want it to be said that we did not give every opportunity for someone to speak. Hearing no one, we'll close the public comments, and I would ask that we ask Ms. Kalish, do you have any legal matters? Does not. Under item 14, time for other business or comments by the board members, if they have any comments. I'm asking if the board members have any comments that they would like to make, either, okay, pass them on. Okay.
Okay, piggybacking off of last month's meeting, I know we had a lot of physicians that got up here and they talked about going through peer-reviewed articles, and anyone who has been following COVID from the beginning knows that most of the articles that were put out were not peer-reviewed in the beginning because it was a novel virus and we didn't know a lot, so they were pushing out articles before they were peer-reviewed, which a lot of our articles have been retracted, and anyone who wanted to know what was going on would try to find articles that would come up dispelling what we were doing here in the hospital, and then they would disappear and really be hard to get to. So there were underground email groups that were made so that they could dispense articles. And I know that they said they had weekly meetings, that they were going over all of the literature. And I truly would like to be privy to what literature was reviewed, just because I know what I found, and I'm just a nurse. And I could find so many articles that one, they weren't great studies. The ones that they were pushing forward, a lot of one of the it was one of the articles, and it was a big study, but the whole thing fell apart, and even the BMJ, they've retracted these stories after the articles that were put out there. And I know here, and I had questions when I worked in triage that we would, right after the vaccine rollout, we saw a ton. It was COVID vaccine reaction. That's another reason why our staffing was low, is because when they would go through and vaccinate us in our pods, we had nurses that couldn't come back, and they were gone for a while because they didn't feel well. They were telling them, well, it's an immune response. And then we were told that we could put COVID vaccine reaction in triage because the whole page was full of them. And then we had changed. At first, everybody wanted to know in triage when you got your vaccine. Well, then after we saw all the vaccine reactions, they took off that part. And I said, well, wait, why are we not asking what day they got their COVID vaccine? Now we actually take their card. We want to make sure, and those dates are on there. But before, none of that, like all of these things have changed. And obviously things will change as, we knew more about what was going on. Also, for the whole mask thing, there were studies that were done specifically for the ER that showed that our N95s were only 40% effective after an 8-hour shift, yet we were using them 3 to 4 shifts in a row, putting them in an ultraviolet thing. And then you had a lot of us being called anti-vaxxers when that's the only vaccine that we don't have. We're totally vaxxed except for COVID vaccine, and you had physicians who didn't want to work with you or didn't want you in their room. So it wasn't great for patient care. We even had, I know from other nurses that there were patients that were told, I'll still take care of you even though you're not vaccinated. That's not how it should be. That's not something that we should have been pushed. I mean, and if anyone watched some of the other roundtables that have been out there, we have an orthopedic surgeon, he has transverse myelitis after the first shot. There are so many injuries, and when you have to do a risk benefit analysis, and it's a patient to physician decision, and that's been taken off the table, and I think that's why we're hearing all of this. And it's our poor children that are going to suffer from this. We know they have IgG, IgA in their oral mucosa nerves and eyes, so they don't readily transmit and they don't get this disease. But yet we're still now just getting on a booster for our 6-month-olds. We're vaccinating with the DEP virus, it's the alpha. Now they have the bivalent, which, like I said, has only not been tested in human trials. But we've still been vaccinating with a virus that is no longer in existence, and it doesn't make any sense. So I felt the same way after hearing all the physicians come up. I just felt like the people that came to speak out that were hurt didn't feel heard. It totally negated anything that they came up. All they were was pretty much like, suck it up. And a lot of us that you work in different areas in the hospital, in the ER, you saw all of this. Unfortunately, when they would get up to a floor, a lot of people don't know what transpired, why they're here, what happened. When you have young people that you're working with and now they have heart arrhythmias, strokes, shingles, when you're seeing shingles in a young person 5 times on the affected side of where they were vaccinated, these things are anomalies. And not one of us, not one of the people that I've ever worked with has ever filed a VAERS report. One, we don't have time to eat, much less take 30 to 45 minutes to go and file a VAERS report. So that's how we lost a lot of staff. They were tired of the fight to not get vaccinated, and they'd rather go and leave the profession, which was really sad, and we've seen that across the country. So that's.
No, thank you for sharing. But I would recommend that I try to start making some notes, but I see that Dr. Furica and Dr. Hoffberger are making notes, and I would encourage Bridget to visit with them privately and make sure those issues get examined as we look at how we respond to the COVID-19. Thank you for sharing that. Other board members around the room? Patty?
Yes, so questions were asked about special committee. I know we're going to do a quality review, not feeling that. What's after that? It doesn't seem like that's really something that's seen well with everybody.
Well,
so let's revisit it, maybe?
Well, I'll address it from my perspective. When Vic made the motion at our meeting, it was a pretty lengthy, it was a well-written motion, but it involved other things that I didn't think was appropriate. And that particularly when we have a quality committee that is charged with the responsibility of overseeing medical care. And so my effort, and I think the board supported it, was to table the motion. It was not to defeat the motion or to make it go away. It was to table it, to allow our medical professionals, our management staff to conduct a comprehensive review and come back and make a report to the board. And for us to respond to that report, agree, or if need be, pull the motion back off the table and see where we need to improve. So if somebody wants to blame someone, that's me. And the board was supporting, and Dick was supporting as well, is that it should first be looked at by the medical staff, the management. They come back with 2 reports, one in private that has to do with individual medical cases in terms of honoring, and then secondly, a public presentation in terms of the response to COVID-19. I don't know how clear we can be. Maybe in terms of timing, I would expect, if I said 60 in the piece I wrote for the newspapers, I said 60 to 90 days, but I would suspect that February, we should be able to have that process completed. Is that a fair time frame? February meeting or the March meeting that we openly discuss these matters. That's my thought. But again, I want to emphasize, we meet as the committee of the whole. Every board member is a member of the quality committee. And as a member of the quality committee, you can establish some parameters. If there are certain things you want to have looked at, such as Bridget has brought up, I really think if y'all can communicate that to either David or to Dr. Fiorica, they'll come back and respond to this. And actually, I think that we should listen to the debate from both last month's meeting as well as the citizens who came forward today, and those issues that they brought up. I heard several that we disagree with, but that we ought to address those in that. So those are my thoughts. Other board members are welcome to jump in. Oh, perfect.
So Tram today just named the chairman of our various committees, as is the annual process.
And the vice chairs.
I'm sorry, the chairs and the vice chairs of each of the committees. So given that due to sunshine law, we are not allowed to speak to each other unless we are at a publicly noticed meeting where minutes take place. So no, none of us have been able to talk to each other since the November meeting because we are doing our absolute best to follow Florida state law. So with that, we just learned today that I will be chairing the quality committee and Bridget is going to be, on the other side, we chairing the, vice chairing the quality committee together. So having only had a couple of hours since that was just given to me, I briefly spoke with Dr. Fiorica and David about wanting to make sure we pull this review together in a timely fashion, because I'm sure every minute is so potent when you're talking about a loved one. And so as a result, given that we have the holidays this week and then the new year, I requested we could have that prepared in February, giving us time in January to have our independent meetings with Dr. Fiorica, since again, we cannot meet outside of a publicly noticed meeting where minutes are taken. And then we could perhaps scaffold out the structure of what that report would look like to be presented in February. We could at least present the scaffolding of the components of that at the January quality meeting. Again, this is subject to Tram finalizing the schedule. But I certainly think some common themes that we're hearing, in addition to reviewing these case studies, are issues around vaccination, issues around alternative treatments. So we do absolutely hear you. And so that's just a recommendation. I'm doing my best to not usurp the role of the board chair here, and also to stay within the parameters of Florida law. So if that, rough draft sounds good, that, Patricia, you and I chat with Dr. Fiorica, as some of the members of the quality committee members, meaning the medical staff, determine almost like the outline of what the review would encompass. We present that review in January for feedback from our other quality committee members, and then we actually make sure that we then fill in that outline for presentation in February. And then the board, in my mind, can either vote to accept that review, and the recommendations that come out with it. You may have heard me say this last month, that I really think that we should be looking at best practices across the country, other communities. We are not the only community in America that are having these really contentious and painful and tragic conversations. So I also think that would be a component. What else is going on? What can the hospital do differently? I would like all of that to then be either accepted or not accepted come February, and then you can take the reins from there. That's how I'm seeing it, and I'm gonna give you the mic back, and Mrs. I think you agree. Yeah, process. And the other thing I wanna say, and I want the public to hear this, the whole reason I became interested in serving on the hospital board really goes back to my childhood as the daughter of a 100% service disabled veteran. So I know what it is to have a family member who is made disabled in service to a country that didn't always get it right, to put it lightly, and really wanting to treat patients as individuals and family members, not just as a number. So know my heart in that. I'm doing my best to stay calm as we take in all these viewpoints, especially as we prepare this review. I'm so glad each one of you came last month and this month, but to speak for the other members that spoke, they're constituents too. They have loved ones in the hospital too. Some of the people that are on this administrative staff had loved ones who died in the hospital, also with COVID, during this time too. And so I just want to make sure that even if you happen to work at the hospital, we are the #1 employer in Sarasota County. We have over 8,000 people who work here. So in that vein, I am thankful for the white coats that spoke and the other people that spoke, because I do not want any speech to be chilled. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Other comments from the board members? Hearing none, I think that's a good outline. Say then in January, when quality meets, then the board actively participates in making sure that we're examining those issues like Bridget already. Big, and so that the report that comes back in February. Yes.
I would just want to say that the reason I supported that was because the quality committee can look at data that an independent committee possibly may not be able to look at because it's a closed session. So my reason was that we want to get the most information out so we can have the most complete investigation. That was it. Thank you.
Any other comments, board members? Hearing none, I hope y'all all have a wonderful Christmas or Hanukkah. I think it started last time. Please be safe over the holidays. Look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thank you for coming to this meeting as adjourned.